Hi again then guys, and welcome to another look back into the world of Forza 3 at some of the most interesting unique cars that were featured on that game. And you're probably wondering, why am I featuring this one? Because the X5 is not a Forza 3 exclusive. It's still on Forza, even on much newer games, on both Motorsport and Horizon. So why is it here? Surely it's not a special car. But that's the weird thing, because this one actually is. And it's such a weird choice of car to have as a single game exclusive. Because that's exactly what this is. There is no other Forza game to feature this car on either the Motorsport or Horizon games in standard or DLC form. That's interesting, if not strange. So why did they do that? Well, I'm not exactly sure why they did. I should think it was probably current marketing as far as BMW goes. They wanted that version represented in particular, and the car is of course an X5, their flagship SUV, the second generation in particular, and this one is not the M model, which of course is featured on other games, as well as the X6M as well, both of which are pretty good SUVs. Not the best, but quite good. This one though is not the M Power or M Sport version. This is like one of the Z4s featured on Forza as well, the very long named X5 xDrive48i. Snappy name, certainly for a snappy car, and of course the 48 refers to the engine, which is a 4.8 litre. It puts out a pretty decent actually spec of 350 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque. That's good, considering that it's kind of a sleeper. Visually speaking, it doesn't look that impressive. It just looks like the kind of X5 that you'd expect to see on the road at pretty much any time. The weight is okay. It weighs 2.4 tons, which, to put it into some kind of comparison, is about the same as a Bentley Continental GT. So for an SUV, that's not too bad. It's lighter than quite a few of the others, but at the same time, this isn't what you could call a super sports SUV. It's more of just an SUV. Not that that's a bad thing, but of course it means you have to go into it with more measured expectations. You don't have, for instance, Cherokee SRT8 numbers or Audi Q7 V12 TDI torque or anything like that. Of course it's not going to accelerate like a Mercedes ML63 or have the tuning potential necessarily of even something like a Hummer. But what this car does have is one very important thing in particular, and that is that it's made by BMW. And I'm not saying that to sound cheesy or to say, oh, BMWs are so great. I'm not even a fan of BMW that much as a brand. They're okay, I respect them, but I don't love them. But in particular, the relevance that that has to an SUV is that when BMW approaches a car, and this is just a simple fact regardless of if you're a fan of them or not, they actively try to make those vehicles handle like normal cars, regardless of how big or heavy they are. That is what they are known for. Driver's cars. The M3, of course, was the icon and still is the icon of that kind of driving style. Others have done it as well, the M4, various others too, the 135i, the 1M, even the M1, the supercar. And this one, although not to that same level, offers that same kind of main advantage, because even though it is a 2.4 ton, 350 horsepower, relatively unassuming SUV, a luxury one, yes, but not a particularly eye-catching one. I doubt that many people even realise that this wasn't exclusive, because it's that easy to overlook. But with all of that being true, as soon as you get into the car and take a corner, for instance, it doesn't even matter that it's not a super sport SUV. It doesn't matter that it doesn't have 500 horsepower, because you can straight away feel, especially if you've driven other SUVs, in particular in their stock form, the potential that the car has, because it's already good through corners. Now, of course, take that with a pinch of salt, because I'm not saying that it can beat all of the other SUVs in tuned or stock form. It's not going to embarrass most sports cars anytime soon. But it has that raw canvas, I like to call it, that you can work from, which allows you to have a car that can not just boast huge numbers, but that can actually deliver on the numbers which it has. Because there are plenty of cars which do have massive numbers, which aren't necessarily as quick as those numbers might suggest. If you actually think of two, which I mentioned earlier, the Hummer and the Audi Q7 V12 TDI in particular, I personally love both of those cars. I genuinely love them. I do not love the BMW X5. As I already said, I'm not a fan of the brand. But I have to say, even though I love the others more, this one feels more impressive. Now, compared to a Hummer, you'd probably expect that, but compared to the V12 TDI, how could this possibly feel better? Well, mainly because the V12 TDI from Audi in particular, and some others too, but that one's a perfect example, is one of those cars which I referenced just now. They have great numbers on paper, but when you actually drive them, they can almost feel a little bit underwhelming. In the real world, not so much, but on a game, for sure, because it feels like what it is, a big, heavy SUV with a whole lot of torque, but not necessarily a whole lot of performance, and it doesn't really like taking corners, it just does it out of necessity. Likewise with a Hummer, you do have a huge amount of torque, you also have a huge amount of weight, and although the car is very planted and stable, it's hardly going to worry most other cars around a track. Whereas a car like this, you can immediately feel that this doesn't feel like an SUV. Of course, in a general sense it does, but you know what I mean. It has an ability which, in a similar way to what Ford did way back in the day with the Transit van, they actively tried to make something which was not just a big boxy alternative to what everyone else was doing, but something which had the same advantages as everyone else, which in the case of a van is carry space, size of the vehicle, all that kind of stuff, and in the case of an SUV it's size, off-road ability, luxury. So offer that, but then give it something which they don't generally have, and in the case of this car, it's that driver feedback, the handling feel through corners. So although this car isn't exactly a vehicle that I'd recommend going back just to experience, and of course I don't want to make it seem like it's the best thing ever, because when you do drive it, it's not going to blow your mind, but I'm just saying that there are certain cars that you can drive regardless of which version in the range that they are, which you can straight away just feel that it has potential. Not to be the best thing ever, but to be good. And this one has that potential. I still don't fully understand why they chose this model. As I said, it's probably something to do with marketing, but they did choose to, and at least it gives us a reason to go back once again to Forza 3 to consider a strange choice, but an interesting one, of unicorn car. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.